Welcome to Mega Talk. We're still the talk show in boxing. So it's official that Frazer Clarke will be fighting Marius Wack on the 6th of June, and this is going to be at the York Hall. As we knew that he was a mandatory challenger for the British title to fight against Fabio Wardley, but on the date of the purse bids, he was pulled out. And since that, it's caused a lot of controversy regarding why he was pulled out and who pulled him out. And a lot of the blame seemed to go on Ben Shalom, and some of the reasoning being is because they says that he pulled him out because he didn't want to lose the purse bids to Eddie Hearn on the zone. All kinds of reasons have been given, and since that, Eddie Hearn has come out, and Eddie Hearn has really slaughtered Ben Shalom and says that he shouldn't have done it. He's kind of undermined Frazer Clarke. But my thing is, wouldn't Eddie Hearn say that anyway? Because isn't Ben Shalom just his competitor? So can you really read into that? We'll come back onto that a little bit later on. Frazer Clarke had an interview with IFL today. He spoke a lot about how he felt regarding the purse bids being pulled down. He did explain that he has calmed down a lot because he says he was really upset on the day. He did want to fight on the 10th of June, but now that has to be cancelled because he will be now fighting Marius Wack. He explained that there was a lot of raised voices and he was really upset about it because he's very outspoken. He explains that he's had to pull his Twitter accounts because he's had arguments and disputes with people on there regarding his purse bids being cancelled. He says that there was a lot of people who says that he should leave boxer, but let's just have a look at this. Eddie Hearn was with Sky. Eddie Hearn has left Sky and he's now competing against Sky. When Eddie Hearn was at Sky, he wasn't given a really brilliant budget like how Ben Shalom has been given a really good budget, and I know that Eddie's not over the moon about that. You know, he even commented my budget wasn't as big as that. Maybe there's a few regrets of him leaving, maybe there's a bit of bad taste in his mouth, but Sky's now his competitor. Eddie Hearn also wanted Frazer Clarke. He did mention it some months ago, probably over a year ago, that he did have talks, but Frazer decided to go with boxer. Obviously, I know that Eddie's not going to be over the moon about that either. So I'm not surprised when Eddie will be saying things against Ben Shalom against boxer. And I don't read too much into that. And to be honest, I don't think you should. The interviewer was asking prodding questions and in some ways saying that Ben Shalom was stopping his career to progress in the speed of which it's supposed to go because he didn't want him to fight on the zone. I'm not picking one way or the other, but even though he doesn't fight him now, is that such a bad thing? Some facts. Frazer has not done rounds. There was some talk that for somebody to be able to go for the British title that they had to have at least had scheduled 10 rounds of boxing. He hasn't had that. He hasn't had that at all. He's had 6 rounders and his last fight was an 8 rounder. He hasn't had a 10 rounder, and I think that's why he wanted to have the fight in June so he could get a 10 rounder under his belt. So he doesn't know how he would get on in a 10-round fight. His last fight was an 8 rounder. He stopped in round 2. The fight previously was a 6 rounder and the guy retired in the 4th round. Ben Shalom says that he's pulled him out because it's in his best interest. Is that such a bad thing to say? When you compare Frazer Clarke, because he was going on about what Joe Joyce had done within that time, Joe Joyce and him was roughly the same age. Joe Joyce was, when he first started out, 30, 31-ish. Frazer Clarke is 30, 31 now. Roughly about the same. Joe Joyce went for his first British title, I'm saying British title, on his 10th fight. Frazer's had 6 fights, and maybe he would have got the British title on his 8th fight if he had got a fight in between. If not, he would have had to have fought the British title in his 7th fight. Now, I don't know about you, I've watched a few of Frazer's fights, and I've seen inexperience, as which you should do. I know he's had 90 odd amateur fights, but amateur fights are not professional fights. Yes, he's fought the best in the world, but they're 3-round fights. Even Frazer himself has says that amateur fighting and professional fighting are two different things. They're two different animals. He's fought some great people as amateurs. But when I look down his professional record, he hasn't fought any outstanding name that I can look on for any title at all. None at all. By this time, Joe Joyce had fought for the Commonwealth title in his 4th fight. Frazer hasn't. Frazer's retired his last 2 opponents, and the one previous before that, he won on points. It was only his first 3 fights what he won by knockout. His first fight, who was on their debut fight, he knocked him out. Second fight, he fought somebody who was 11 wins, 8 losses. Third one, he fought an unbeaten fighter, 7-0, knocked him out. Fabio Wardley. I know that people say that, well, he's had no amateur experience. And when I first seen Fabio Wardley, I says, this guy had no amateur experience. He's going to be a flash in the pan. But Fabio Wardley has got a devastating knockout punch. Okay, you might say he's not fought any outstanding fighters, but you know something, he's fought some people who has fought for a world title. Okay, Eric Molina's not the best example. He's fought Nick Webb, that's for the English title. I know that Nick Webb's not an outstanding fighter. He's fought Nathan Gorman, who had only lost once, and what a fight that was. That was a TKO in the 3rd round. But when I look at Fabio's hit list, and I am going to call it a hit list, apart from his first fight, every other of his 16 fights has been knockout, 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 and the list goes on. 16 fights, 15 knockouts. Look at Frazer's. 6 fights, 5 KOs, but 2 of those were retirements. I don't think that he needs to rush. Yes, he's 31 years old. We get that. But if he has another couple more fights under his belt, a couple of 10-rounders, and then fights Fabio Wardley, he would have a bit more experience as a professional fighter. Because it's not everybody you're going to hit is just going to go down. It's not everybody you're going to hit you can knock out. Big Fraze says that he's going to fight Wack, and that's going to be his hardest fight. Marius Wack is a very good fighter. He's had 36 fights, but 19 of them have been knockouts. So just over half of his wins have been knockouts. So he's not a huge puncher. He's lost 9, 4 of which of those were knockouts. He's going to be fighting on the 3rd of June, and then he's supposed to be ready to fight Frazer Clarke on the 16th of June. What happens if he gets a cut? What happens if he loses? No fight. Is that such a clever idea? But if we look on his fight record, his last fight, lost. Fight before that, lost. Fight before that, lost. Fight before that, Kevin Johnson, old man Kevin Johnson, won by unanimous decision. Fight before that, lost. That was against Dillian White. So his last win was against a 43-year-old Kevin Johnson, who's nothing more than a gatekeeper. He's won 34 fights, he's lost 16 and drawed 1. If he's depending on Marius Wack being a harder fight than Fabio Wardley, I think he might have a rude awakening. Marius Wack is not the fighter what he once was. So pulled out in his best interest by Ben Shalom. Well, maybe. He's told him that he'll have many more good days. But more so to me, he's going to have learning fights. He's convinced, just as some other ones who are coming up, that he will beat Fabio Wardley. I'm not convinced. I think he needs the rounds. I think he needs the experience. What do I know? That's what he'll say. Yeah, what do I know? But I'm looking by the fight record, and I would say if he can get a couple of 3 more fights before he takes that fight, he's going to get more ring experience. Remember, he's fighting against a young, hungry fighter who's only 28. He's never lost and he can punch. Don't be fooled that he hasn't had any amateur experience and use that as an excuse for you to think that you'll win that fight. It's interesting. I think we need to watch and see if that fight happens with Marius Wack. As I says, Marius Wack has got a fight a couple of weeks before he fights Frazer Clarke. If he loses that fight or gets injured, that fight might not happen. What do you think? Do you agree with my points? Do you not agree with my points? If you don't, leave your comments and just explain why you don't. If you do, the same. Explain why you do. Please remember to subscribe. If you like what I'm saying, subscribe. If you do like it, press a like button also, please. Thank you. You've been listening to Mega Talk.